Welcome to the Love Me, Touch Me, Heal Me Summit, a one-of-a-kind event to expand your understanding of the mind, body, and spirit connection and the incredible healing potential of touch and body awareness. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Goodstone. For this special event, I have interviewed many of my esteemed colleagues, advanced practitioners in a wide variety of body therapy, somatic, and body-oriented psychotherapy methods. Please keep an open mind and allow yourself to discover new possibilities for healing. Today, I'll be speaking with Ted Riskin, and we met at the U.S. Association for Body Psychotherapy conference at the dinner. And as soon as you mentioned that you did something with breathwork, holotropic breathwork, I realized that's an area that not too many people are talking about, even in the body psychotherapy field. And I thought that's really valuable. But you also have trained in core energetics and EMDR and hypnosis. So welcome.
Thank you.
And then I'd like you to tell your journey of how you got into this field and got into these particular modalities. And then later I'll ask again about how they helped you heal.
Okay, sure, thanks. Well, before, because I'm feeling self-conscious about something, I just wanted to say that I'm having a little issue with my eyes, and the lighting and whatever, looking at a screen is a little problematic. So if I'm squinting or anything, I'm not having a reaction to anything you're asking me. It's just a physical thing. So let's get that out of the way. My journey into this kind of work, I guess, I was a very mental person, very controlled. I have a degree in math. And then I got into a spiritual practice where I do meditation, but I had never had any connection to feelings. And pretty much didn't see a need for that or know that they were missing. And breathwork was really
not unusual. There's a lot of people like that.
Yeah. So, but still, fortunately for me, at a young age, someone offered a breathwork session for me. And actually, the first time I did breathwork, not that much happened, but I had a very vivid image, like a memory of the last time I had cried. I was probably about 8 years old, and I could feel all the surroundings and remember just having this decision that it was stupid. Like there was no point to the crying. It wasn't getting me anything, and that had been the last time I cried. The second breathwork session I did, pretty much I cried the whole time. And to just be able to feel that release, to sort of open up access to this whole other side of me was revelatory. And I guess that kind of piqued my interest. So since then, becoming a psychotherapist and looking for, and even as a psychotherapist, I sort of led with a cognitive perspective. I come from data processing, so to me, I was just debugging people instead of computers now. And it was fun, it was interesting, in some ways effective, but I sort of realized I wanted to add something to the work I did that was more experiential. And at the same time, I recognized the need for myself to be able to kind of open the doorway to feel more of what was happening inside of me.
So do you want me to ask, the next question is, tell about these healing modalities and how they help to heal. So how does the breath work heal? And you've done some EMDR, briefly a little bit about the different work that you do.
I think, can I just talk generally about what I think healing is?
Sure.
And then, so, the word healing, to me, it just means becoming more whole. And healing and wholeness come from the same root. So what makes me not whole is the parts of me, the aspects of myself that I am unable or unwilling to embrace and incorporate. So, Freud would call this the unconscious, Jung would call it the shadow. And without the connection to these other parts of me, I'm not whole. I can't be whole. And what stands in between me and these aspects of myself as my defense. Right, and the defense, um, I think I would say there's no healing without getting to the other side of that defense. And the art of therapy, in some ways, how do we do that? And various therapies do that in different ways. And so the kinds of therapies that I like to do give me a toolbox of different ways to work with the defense. One that you didn't mention that I use quite a lot is internal family systems, which takes a very respectful, gentle, kind approach towards the defense. In fact, it's almost like we're asking the defense permission, and we wait till it's ready to voluntarily step back and give us access to what's in the unconscious. In IFS, we call them exiles. These parts, we call them exiles. But breath work, I think, is so interesting because it basically disables the defense. And there are some downsides to that, and maybe we can talk about that later, but it's very effective at doing that. And I'm sure a lot of the viewers know of Bessel van der Kolk, who's, I guess, considered the foremost authority in trauma and PTSD. I heard him give a talk a few years ago, and he said, no healing happens in the cortex. And to me, what he's saying is we have to get out of our heads. We have to get out of the thought process. We have to activate the deeper parts of our brain, the amygdala, the limbic system, and bring up these sort of emotional memories and aspects of ourselves for anything useful to happen. And for many of us, our defense is strong enough that someone just talking to us is like that's where our defense has expertise. That's where it's at home.
And we're comfortable with that defense. It's what keeps us feeling safe.
Yes. So to me, I think it's great that you're doing this overview of all kinds of somatic therapies, because all of them really have the potential to go beyond the talking and get access to something beyond the defense. So breath work, I'll describe sort of my sense of how that works. I don't think I could defend this, but I think there's a lot of validity to it. Well, first, so in breathwork, what we're doing is we're breathing faster and deeper, and we're connecting the breaths. And we're usually, in most forms of breathwork, we're using music to help deepen the process. But the breathing itself, and there's so many ways to explain what happens, but say from a perspective of physiology, when we breathe this way, a faster, deeper, connected breath, we are blowing off more carbon dioxide than usual. And that changes the pH of the blood. And that causes our hemoglobin to bind oxygen in a different way. And I've read both, that it makes it sort of bind it tighter in the brain, so there's less released, or pick it up less efficiently in the lungs. But either way, there's, I believe, a slightly less amount of oxygen that gets to the brain. And I believe that the brain then is going to prioritize the parts of the brain that we need for survival. So the first thing that's going to get sacrificed is the cortex, is sort of our thinking, controlling, the last thing that evolved in our evolution, the last thing that develops in utero. And in some way, then the cortical areas, what we might call the left brain, goes offline or gets reduced in its emphasis or importance. And this allows what's underneath that to come to the surface. So what happens after that, is sort of about how you do the breath work. But that's sort of, I believe, physiologically how we're creating an opening.
Right. It's so powerful what you're saying. And I'm realizing as you're talking how important it is for the therapist to be skilled. Because if you're going to help someone to bypass their normal thinking and get into a past trauma or whatever comes up, the therapist needs to be skilled to stay there and help the person.
That's right. Yeah. I think the most important aspect of a breathwork training is to do that inner journey a lot and get to where there's nothing that's going to feel threatening to us, no matter what comes up in someone's process. And also, I think a breath worker needs to get in touch with our own need to feel useful or to help, and learn to get that to step back so that we can fully follow the healing process that's inherently happening in the person who's doing the breathing.
I have to share that I took a breathwork weekend many, many years ago, and I was lying on the floor breathing and got into an experience of the birth canal. I felt like I was in there, and then one of the assistants came over and said, "Stop crying and stay with your process," and that was it. It just took me out of it.
Yeah, it's painful to hear these kind of stories, and in some ways surprising. The people that I know who train breath work, I mean, it's one of the first things that is emphasized is to trust the person's process and not interfere like that. The guy who directs the Graph transpersonal training, which is the training for holotropic breathwork, he wrote a treatise called Doing, Not Doing. So this is all about how do we, as a facilitator, do what we have to do to hold the space, but then not do the things that other parts of us want to do that feel the need to interfere. Yeah.
And that works for all types of therapy, not to interfere.
Yeah.
Let it
I think some therapies are more directive than others. And breathwork is perhaps one of the most non-directive, because once someone is doing the breathing, we just step back and let whatever happens happen.
And so tell about some of the other methods that you use along with that, EMDR, and you said hypnosis also.
Yeah, these are things that I've trained in earlier in my career. EMDR at this point, I will use just in its most obvious applications, when someone is clear about a memory and still feels the traumatic feelings and energies. And so I still find EMDR effective at kind of clearing that. Hypnosis I've really replaced with internal family systems. The hypnotherapy that I trained in really was about making that bridge between a current reaction and a past event or memory. And it took a while to set it up and put the person in a trance and play the right music and do the whole procedure and the visualization. I find that internal family systems allows us by, and I'm talking about things that we haven't really defined, but we're working with parts. And when we sort of get the part that's involved in the reaction and we start talking to that part is very happy to take us back into the source of what it's feeling. So I pretty much replaced hypnosis by just doing IFS.
Okay, and you're saying internal family systems is within the person, as opposed to family systems with their parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles.
Exactly. So Dick Schwartz, who developed the model, was a family systems therapist. So he was working with families mainly about eating disorders. And as his patients would talk about the parts of them, like the part of them that wants to control or restrict or eat, he sort of made the connection between the family of the internal parts and how that needed to be balanced and harmonized, just like the external family needed to be balanced and harmonized. So that was sort of the genesis of the model.
And are you aware of any research about either family systems or the breath work?
Well, IFS just got, I don't know the word, approved as an evidence-based therapy based on some research with, I believe, rheumatoid arthritis. And by having the arthritis patients talk to their arthritis as a part, like a part of them that's generating these symptoms, they created statistically significant relief in pain and increase in mobility. So, that's a big enough study to be really recognized. And breathwork, unfortunately, there are a bunch of sort of small private studies, research projects, PhD theses, and they tend to show good results in terms of anxiety and depression, fear of death, personality changes, openness, spiritual experience and openness to spirituality, family relations. But there, as far as I know, has been no big enough study to be really published and recognized. So if anyone's into doing that, get a hold of me and I'll hook you up.
Yeah. One of the problems with somatic therapists and many psychotherapists is we're busy doing the work and having the experiences with clients, not doing the actual research about it.
Yeah. And I think, in breath work, the breath work creates a shift in consciousness that shifts us out of the very type of consciousness you need to do research. So it shifts us out of linear cause and effect 3D consciousness, and perhaps that has something to do with why we just have not backed it. Also, say in EMDR, Francine Shapiro just dedicated herself to getting the research done. In the IFS world, there's a group of people who are very committed. It just takes a huge amount of work, and there's been no real champion in the breathwork world to get that done.
And it reminds me, Dr. Tiffany Field did a tremendous amount of research about massage.
Yeah.
So that there are pockets of this research. We just know the value of touch and body awareness.
I also think in the breathwork world, again, there's I think there's people who don't want it to be medicalized, who are almost glad that we're not recognized by the medical establishment because they don't want this work to be co-opted. For them, it's more of a spiritual practice than a therapy or a medical intervention.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, you really need to be skilled to do this, to stay present. And when it gets too popular, people give weekend workshops and then someone's doing it and they don't have the same skill level.
That's right. And there are problems that happen from unskilled or really even untrained facilitators that go out there and think they can just offer it. Yeah.
So the next question is, can you share with us an example of one or two people who have healed or benefited, or what has happened with a client in this work?
Well, first, can I mention my website, or I don't know if you'll have a link, but so my website is just tedriskin.com, and if you follow the link to breathwork page, I think it says how I do it, breathwork, and on that page is a list of, 50 or 60 accounts that people just send me after they've done workshops. So there's such a huge range of experiences, and you get more of a flavor there. If I think about sort of recent workshops or even clients of mine that come and do the work, one example would be somebody who suffered trauma as a child and was really victimized. And in a breathwork session, spontaneously started to express anger. And a physical expression of that anger, let that energy move through their body, and afterwards was able to claim that power, which allows us to feel safer in the world, to know, like, well, even if something like this were to happen again, I'm no longer stuck in this little body without the power to push back. Another recent workshop that a client attended, basically this one, again, with a fair amount of trauma in their past, got a real clarity that what was happening was because of the where the parent couldn't or wouldn't show up. As children, I think it's very scary to admit to ourselves, I'm not getting it from my parents, and they're not going to ever do it. So we'll tend to think something about me. If I could just be more lovable, cute, smart, then I'll be okay. It's at least I can have some hope and get through my childhood. But that leaves a very strong tendency to criticize ourselves. It really develops the inner critic. And so again, spontaneously in a breathwork session, this person really got clarity that this had nothing to do with them, the trauma that they were going through, and was able to sort of lighten up on the self-criticism.
Wonderful.
So in general, breathwork's interesting because it can bring you into a whole lot of different experiences. Stanislav Grof, who's developed holotropic breathwork with his wife Christina, he talks about a cartography of the psyche. So this is sort of his sense of what's going on in there, and this comes from, he used to be an LSD psychiatrist and researcher, so he did thousands of LSD therapy sessions, thousands of breathwork sessions, and put together a picture of what happens, and he sees 4 different realms of experience that pop up in a breathwork session, which he calls the sensory and somatic, the biographical and individual unconscious, the perinatal, and the transpersonal. And so healing can happen very powerfully in each one of these in its own way. And just to give a little bit of what we're talking about, so the sensory and somatic is just kind of what all of the somatic therapists are doing. It's sort of helping people open up flows of energy and move past blocks, sort of find where trauma is held in the body, where we're armored. And I've seen huge physical healings in breathwork. I think there's a few accounts on my site, cure of food allergies, of neuropathy, just sort of something had to move energetically and it gets fixed. The biographical is just what we do in talk therapy, right? It's the traumas, but it's getting into the limbic system and working there rather than just sort of talking about the memory of what happened. The perinatal is what you talked about, right? You had a perinatal experience in breath work, and this can be immensely powerful just because of the primal beliefs that actually are instilled at that time of our lives. If you, I don't know how many people remember, I remember Psych 101 and the picture of Conrad Lorenz, where he's sort of walking down a path and these ducklings are following him. And he studied imprinting. And the idea is that at that age, when we learn something, it just becomes part of reality. So I think human beings get imprinted with beliefs like the world isn't safe, or it's painful, or I'm not welcome, I don't want to be here, it hurts to breathe, I'm not the right sex, or I'm not the right thing. And you could be in talk therapy forever and not touch this. So getting to that perinatal level can be hugely beneficial, and these beliefs can really be unlodged and released. And then transpersonal just means beyond the personal self. So it's experiences that transcend the body, the ego, time and space. And in some ways, to have a spiritual experience, to have an actual experience that I am not disconnected in this world, that I am part of something larger, might be the most healing thing of all.
And also that I'm not in control of everything. It's not all my fault, or it's not all that I did it. Sometimes needed from somewhere.
And that's what the non-ordinary state teaches us. Human beings were wired up to be able to be in Alan Watts called it floodlight consciousness, along with spotlight consciousness, right? So, and yet we live in cultures that funnel us and support us in remaining in spotlight consciousness, focused, in control, logical, and sort of contained by the rules that our society believes in. And but we are just ready to access what we call a non-ordinary state, which is really just an expanded other way of being in the world. And there's many, many things that will do that for a human being, including substances, plants, and even synthesized chemicals. But just things as simple as fasting, temperature extremes, drumming, chanting, dancing, spinning, pain. and especially breathing will just take us to that state. And in that state, the issue of control is just gone. We're just a part of something and we're flowing with it. And it's so valuable to be able to control. Obviously is useful. It created, really wonderful things, including these computers we're talking on.
Yeah.
But it doesn't solve the problem of fulfillment, contentment, happiness. For that, we have to let go of that and learn to trust the ride.
Yeah, it doesn't work as well in relationships. The one
Absolutely.
person trying to control all the time.
Good luck.
Yeah. Okay, so what kind of training is needed or is required to become qualified as a breath worker or as someone using breath work?
Well, there are all different models and schools and approaches to breath work. I could probably rattle off 10 or 12, and I'm sure there's many more that I've never heard of. And each has their own way of doing training and their own requirements. There is an organization called the Global Professional Training Alliance, which was set up to try to give some standardization to breathwork trainings. And so as a school, a school could apply and after the program was looked into, be sort of approved or certified by the Alliance. But I can speak to the two that I've done. So one is holotropic breathwork, which is quite an involved training. It's 7 6-day modules, residential, followed by a 2-week certification, and then a number of assignments. You need to, do your own sessions. You need to apprentice. There's some writing. You need to make a music set. And this is a very thorough, and it has to be done. You cannot do it in less than 2 years. So the idea is work your own process. Go inside and learn to be with anything in you that's going to be interfering while you're facilitating for someone else. So that's a great training for people who have the time and money. The other one I did is with a woman named Carol Lampman, and her company's called Integration Concepts. She'll take people who are already certified in or doing a healing modality, so already have the training necessary to hold space and be responsible and know the ethics. And in 6 days, along with other requirements as well, your own sessions and this kind of thing, give you a certification in what she calls level 1 breath therapy. And then, of course, you're encouraged to go back for level 2 and advanced training. But sort of the minimal responsible training that I know of is for training where somebody who's already working with clients can go and do this in 6 days residentially.
It's nice to hear about that, just that it's available.
Yeah.
At least for someone to learn about it, and then if they decide they want to go further.
Yeah. And to me, in all these trainings, it's good to learn something, but looking back, to me, the value is what I got, my own experiences. Because, of course, in these trainings, a lot, or if not most of what you're doing, is doing the breathwork and having your own experiences.
Yes. So can you share with us how people can get in touch with you and what services you're offering, what trainings you're offering?
Best thing is just to go to my website, tedriskin.com. And at this point, I'm really just doing local workshops, mostly here in the Asheville area where I live. And I travel back to where I used to be in New York, New Jersey area, and then sometimes into New England and possibly other places. So whatever's going on will be there, and there's somewhere there you can sign up to get on an email list, so you'll get announcements of what's happening in different areas.
So thank you, Ted, so much for participating in this summit.
Thank you, Erica. This was fun, and I'm really glad you're doing this.
Yeah, and people need to hear about this beautiful work.
Yeah.
And to the rest of you listening, I look forward to speaking to you again soon.